America was once paved in gold. Now it appears it was simply gilded. Was the American dream ever real, or was it just something we were sold? America today is a nation divided on many subjects. One of these areas is the status of the American dream. Is it dying? Is it alive still? As educated Americans, it is important to consider an alternative to these two positions. As an American college student, I'm in the midst of trying to raise my status through education. In this speech, I'm going to try and persuade you to believe what I believe, and that the American dream doesn't exist. It is an idea that was perpetuated with capitalist motives and only acts to immortalize the capitalist system in the United States by popularizing commodity goals and status symbols. First, I'll discuss the capitalist system, then the timing and the popularization of the American dream. Next, I will look at how it is considered today. Lastly, I'll explore social mobility and what it adds to the conversation. So, capitalism is a system wherein the capitalists are the people who own the means of production and control the economy. These capitalists then exploit labor to make the highest profit in the production of a commodity. The laborers no longer live in a time where they're able to be self-sufficient and make and provide for themselves. Because of this, they now are forced to buy the market commodities, and this practice returns the money that they earned back into the pockets of capitalists, creating a surplus of money for these capitalists over time, as explored in Marx' Capitalist Volume 1. In the United States, the different classes of society are marked with material symbols. Things like when you consider the upper middle class, you consider new and or luxury cars. This plays an important part of how we consider different classes. Another important thing to consider when considering the American dream is the coining of the term, the American dream. This actually occurred in 1933 by James Truesdell Adams. And the timing of this is very important because 1933 was in the midst of the Great Depression. This is a time when most of America was struggling, and the only way out was to try and buy things and get money back circulating in the marketplace. The Industrial Revolution took place during this time. It was when the society moved from farming and community-focused living to living in cities. This marked the rise of capitalism and the changes of values and worth of society. People were no longer farmers supporting their community, but were workers among the masses of other workers. And people relied on the goods produced by the industries, like we discussed before. We see now that the understanding of the American dream has changed. It has been said that in the last few decades, the American dream has deteriorated and is dying, as found by McClelland and Tobin. When really, if you consider it, this dying coincides with the counterculture of the 1970s that has continued through today with with society's distrust of structures or systems of society, as supported by Caldwell. And this deterioration of the American dream and the distrust of this whole system of our society shows that the American people are no longer buying into the American dream and thus the system as a whole. When people talk about the American dream, what they're talking about is this idea that with hard work and dedication, people are able to lift themselves to higher economic statuses. This climbing of socioeconomic ladders is a definition of social mobility. that's why it's so important to consider this, because social mobility is something that's actually able to be studied through statistics. Many people believe that the American dream is dying, and with it, the capability for intergenerational growth. In reality, social mobility has remained pretty much the same over the last 50 years. There hasn't been changes. They say it's dying, but in reality, there hasn't been much. People are able to move the same amount as they have been able to in the last 50 years. Even historically, from the 1800s through to the Great Depression, the United States has had low levels of social mobility. What this means is, even when the American dream was at its height and people believed in it and people wanted it, in reality, people in the United States have largely been unable to, in their lifetimes, go from being at one socioeconomic level to another. So in all of this, we find that the American dream doesn't exist. It's an idea that has been perpetuated with capitalist motives and only acts to immortalize the capitalist system in the United States by popularizing commodity goals and status symbols to get people to keep buying into this system. So in this, we saw that, first by discussing the capitalist system and the benefits it receives from the American dream, to then looking at the timing of the popularization of the term, and then how people kind of think of the American dream now. And lastly, we talked about social mobility, the key element of the American dream, and how in reality people are still unable to change where they are in the socioeconomic ladder. The American dream provided hope for people locked in a system, but blinded them from the truth of the system. The streets weren't gold, but simply gilded. Perhaps now that people see the reality of the system after listening to this, they can change it. At least that's the hope.